Urgent, Belarus is entering the war. Lukashenko is preparing the first shot. Putin's secret order has been put into action. Russian drones are already flying from Minsk. Apocalypse in Russia. Nature's harsh revenge for Ukraine. Russia is trapped in a terrible disaster. Dagestan has gone underwater. Dam breach in Makhachkala. Putin's bloody retribution which came from an unexpected direction. Explosion in Budapest. There will be no elections. Orban in agony. Vance's visit became a sentence for the Prime Minister. Geopolitical collapse live on air. Putin is in a panic. In his bunker, he is haunted by NATO drones. The dictator has declared war on the Baltics. Zakharova and Peskov are drowning in hysteria. All this and more in our program Hotspot. Right now, Belarus is preparing an active offensive. A new war is about to begin. The fire has been ignited. Russian drones are flying through Lukashenko. The old man is hiding everything. Moscow has set a bad example for Minsk, and it seems it might pay the price for it. A familiar scenario is already on the table. In which direction? In the end, the Belarusian dictator is about to make the first shot. And won't he end up shooting himself in the foot? More on this coming up. Putin's regime is preparing a new staging ground for strikes against Ukraine. This time it's the territory of Belarus.
There can't be any peaceful time, Pavel. We are preparing for war.
Moscow plans to deploy bases for long-range drones in Belarus, a move that could drastically reduce the response time of Ukrainian air defense and shift the balance of threats.
Belarus has never been as ready for war as it is today. Not the way it is prepared now. In all 31 years of Lukashenko's rule, he has never invested so much in the development of the military sphere in Belarus.
And the numbers speak for themselves. Just in the past week, Russia has launched about 400 long-range drones and dozens of missiles at Ukraine. The main strike targeted civilian infrastructure. There are fatalities and dozens of wounded.
Putin is incapable of taking, the Putin occupation army is incapable of taking any offensive actions. There are none. And the Putin army has no potential for offensive operations. And Putin, along with his command, has completely shifted focus to striking peaceful cities in Ukraine.
And this is only part of a broader strategy. After the massive attack on March 24th, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed this. Moscovia is preparing for a new phase of escalation.
We have clear information that Russia is planning further deployment of ground stations as well as the operation of long-range drones, both in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine and at 4 stations on the territory of Belarus. We will respond accordingly.
If earlier Belarus was used as a convenient corridor for war, now the masks are off. Minsk is becoming more deeply involved in the conflict, turning from a transit territory into a full-fledged Russian staging ground for strikes against Ukraine. Since 2022, troops have already entered from here, missiles have been launched, and the offensive on Kyiv began. And apparently, the mustachioed dictator is now openly ready to put Belarus directly under threat. For Ukraine, these are new risks, and the key factor here is distance. The shortest distance from Kyiv to the Russian border. 200 to 250 kilometers. This is time that works in favor of Ukrainian air defense. But if launch positions appear in Belarus, the distance will shrink to about 100 kilometers. And that means less time for detection, less time to react, and a much higher risk of a breakthrough in air defense. And in this configuration, it's not just Ukraine that comes under threat. The risks are rapidly approaching NATO's borders.
Russia is a destroyed civil society that is simply focused only on war and only with war. Russia and its leadership can exist successfully. Of course, we can talk about war, but naturally, all experts are unanimous in their opinion. The Russian Federation will be completely and utterly incapable as well as unable to initiate or sustain any significant war against the United European forces.
The only thing Putin is capable of today is destabilization. But even that is already becoming difficult for them. At the same time, against the backdrop of failures at the front, the Kremlin is betting on what it does best: intimidation. And in this strategy, Belarus becomes a key instrument, a platform from which pressure can be increased and the threat zone expanded. Urgently, Naryev is in the grip of a terrible disaster. There is an emergency there. Dagestan is going underwater. A blow from bad weather hit Makhachkala, and to top it all off, the dam burst. Thousands of Russians are trapped. The authorities pretend that everything is under control. The apocalypse of the century. Putin is to blame for this. The Kremlin has poisoned the lives of its own people. Cruel revenge for Ukraine has come from the most unexpected direction. You need to see this, don't miss it. Dagestan. Is this nature's revenge or complete indifference from the Russian authorities?
That's the kind of disaster we're facing. The 21st century.
For more than 10 days now, Dagestan and Chechnya have been unable to recover from the aftermath of record rainfall since March 28th. And it's not that the government is doing nothing. They just have an ironclad excuse. It's a natural disaster. It's not our fault. But nevertheless, as always, everything is under control. But it looks like it's just another report for Putin.
As of today, the situation in Dagestan remains
under the control of all government bodies.
Meanwhile, in the Republic, there is no electricity, no water, and no communication. And poor Russians are forced to help themselves.
Help us evacuate our people. Our Kamaz trucks, many of them are getting stuck. They can't get out. Well,
and of course, there are the naive video appeals from residents to the authorities. It turns out these are such abnormal precipitation levels. And yet this still isn't enough to declare a state of emergency. I wonder why that is.
Over the course of several consecutive years in their formal and official administrative requests, they persistently requested and advocated for our Novorossiysk district to specifically also be included among those various districts where a state of emergency from the 1990s was originally declared.
So that's what it's about. About receiving some surely financial assistance.
In fact, a wide variety of different legal and administrative mechanisms are included there, including, for example, if the property had been fully insured, then this could potentially be considered as a case of force majeure, and several other similar considerations along those lines. That is, this needs to be looked at separately. Why are the authorities afraid of the announcement? State of emergency or emergency situation, even.
Meanwhile, in the Kremlin itself, there is still silence. But it's not surprising. Putin probably hoped to just wait it out. But that wasn't the case. The dam at the Kezuz reservoir also burst. So to speak, here you go, sign for it. The Kakovka boomerang. But apparently what surprised the head of Dagestan and the mayor of Makhachkala most was the destroyed house, because that's exactly what they came to see. But what's most interesting is the allocation of the budget to the region. After all, 3 years ago, the head of Dagestan happily announced the allocation of the largest amount of funding, 12.5 billion rubles. But where did that money go? It certainly wasn't spent on strengthening or modernizing the city.
Nothing was done. And accordingly, if anything was done at all, it was only on paper. This means, once again, the money ended up in the officials' pockets. And in reality, the region turned out to be completely unprepared for the critical situation that arose. In other words, absolutely nothing. Neither the storm drains were repaired, nor was the dam reinforced. So nothing was done at all.
Well, okay, so what if some residents' houses were destroyed? But what about the critical infrastructure? Surely that's a completely different matter. Or maybe not. At the substations that supply almost half of Makhachkala, it seems no action was taken either. They could have at least surrounded them with sandbags. But no.
Everything in today's Russia is done ass backwards. Yeah, let's not name it outright. Everyone knows what we mean. Ass backwards. Because the authorities are concerned exclusively with the war, and all the money goes to the war. Plus, they're a bit preoccupied with restricting the spread of information and shutting down the internet. Those are the two things the authorities care about. As we've said many times before, Putin doesn't care about people at all.
Putin woke up, or at least pretended to be asleep this whole time. The master of the Kremlin has finally turned his attention to Dagestan, and quite seriously too. He received reports over the phone about the situation in the region.
Why now? That's actually clear, because this is the second time it's happened. There have been casualties, and now he had to at least say something somewhere. And as they say, if this really does lead to the resignation of the head of Dagestan, then it's a kind of warming up of public opinion, showing that Putin is here, Putin is vigilant, he's supposedly in charge. If you thought he was hiding under a log in a bunker, that's not the case. And
the point here is not about the retribution of nature for the bloody war unleashed against Ukraine, but rather that the system itself is incapable of handling even the most basic tasks. Where there should be oversight and accountability, there is corruption and indifference.
when the authorities are completely independent from the people, they have no interest whatsoever in responding in a timely manner because the authorities believe that nothing depends on these very people. And only then if a problem becomes substantial and problematic from a PR perspective, they are compelled to issue a formal public response. In one way or another, regardless of the circumstances, they simply have to react to it. This is how Putin responded.
As a result, any heavy rain or flood once again turns into a catastrophe that could have been prevented. But time and again, the authorities do nothing about it. Simply because essentially they just don't care. A blast in Budapest might even cancel the elections. Orban can no longer be stopped. A crisis hits Moscow's friends in Hungary. The US has abandoned the Prime Minister. Jay Devon's visit did not go according to the script that was needed. This happened unexpectedly. The opposition seeks ties with DC. A prison cell is ready for the Prime Minister. Report follows.
Viktor Orban continues to disrupt the elections in Hungary. The story about Ukraine's fake sabotage of the gas pipeline didn't work. So now they're betting on declaring a state of emergency in the country and postponing the vote. Even US Vice President Jay Devens has already flown in to support Orban in his pre-election agony. By the way, this is the first time in Hungary's history. He also tried to rally the remaining undecided voters to the incumbent prime minister's side by speaking at a rally in his support. Analysts believe that this could partially work.
It's also very interesting how this wavering electorate field will support President Trump in Orban's vision to continue his work as prime minister. Because I should note, for example, there was already a precedent when last year the United States supported Javier Milei in Argentina. That was during the midterm parliamentary elections, and he strengthened his position there.
However, Orban is getting much more help from Moscow. There they are ready not just to campaign, but to take action. Analysts say the result was the story involving an attempt to sabotage a gas pipeline. And now there are also efforts to undermine the elections as a whole.
The arsenal could be quite extensive. The question is, to what extent does Hungarian society trust this as well? If we see, in principle, a lot of these things are very obviously fabricated and it's quite clear to see. Considering that Russian political strategists are working on Orban's campaign, and considering that the gap is widening rather than narrowing, this is also quite telling.
Orban also sees the polling data, so with each passing day he only becomes more dangerous, experts explain. He has nothing much left to lose, and in a situation where there are only a few days left in office, the Hungarian Prime Minister's team might resort to any extremes.
For Orban, these elections are a matter of life and death. During all the time he has been in power, considering that in principle it was probably hard for him to imagine that he would ever be replaced, he has obviously let his guard down. And many people are talking about very real prison terms, which Orban could face for all the manipulations he committed while in office. In
the first place, those related to financing from the Kremlin. To Orban's collection of acts of subservience to Moscow, Bloomberg added another one the other day. Journalists reviewed the transcript of a conversation between Orban and Putin, where Viktor stated that he was ready to make every effort to help Putin with the war in Ukraine. He even compared himself to the mouse from the fable who helps the lion escape from the cage. According to the transcript, this remark made Putin laugh. And the information itself obviously further tanked Orban's approval rating. In
In Hungary, prominent sociologists across the country are already beginning to suggest that this shift essentially signifies there will not only be a fundamental change in the national leadership and a new prime minister, but also a comprehensive transformation of the entire political system that Viktor Orban has been meticulously building over the past 16 years.
Some analysts also believe that the increased interest of the United States in Hungary is further evidence of this. Given the agreements with Washington on the purchase of liquefied natural gas, Vance's visit may be an attempt by the United States to secure contracts, regardless of whether there is a change of power in the country.
Trump, who also takes a critical stance toward the European Union, has decided to occupy those niches that Russia previously held. Therefore, I do not rule out the scenario that if the Hungarian government changes, this mechanism for increasing supplies of alternative energy resources from the United States will remain in place. Instead of those that were supplied from Russia, it will be preserved. This is especially important given the current situation. Due to the conflict in the Middle East, the price of oil and gas is rising.
As for ordinary citizens, it seems that they have finally all understood the promise made back then by the young Orban and the Fidesz party. In more than a decade and a half, it has never become a reality. And in some respects, the situation has only gotten worse.
Especially when it comes to the rule of law and human rights. We know that the judicial reform is completely stalled, the court reform is on pause, and there are also serious concerns about the human rights reform. And today, among all 27 countries of the European Union in terms of corruption, well, specifically, Hungary is in last place. The
Hungarians who know about corruption firsthand have a chance to change their lives. But whether they will want to do so, we'll see on April 12th.
It happened. Putin is seeing NATO drones everywhere. The bunker dweller is throwing accusations, blaming the Baltic countries for attacks on Russia. Zakharova and Peskov no longer know which megaphones to shout into. Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. The dictator can't handle them. Putin is twisting in his office. Ukraine and Japan shook hands over cutting-edge drone technology. It seems our drones have done their job. Moscow can't do anything about it. Could this be the approach of an epic fiasco? Watch this.
Russia has threatened the Baltic states over Ukraine. The spokesperson for the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Maria Zakharova, made veiled threats against the Baltic states, accusing them of allegedly providing their airspace to Ukraine for strikes on Russian territory. Zakharova noted that the Baltic states have received
The system will automatically generate and display the corresponding warning message to ensure that the user is fully aware of the potential risks and necessary precautions required at this specific stage of the process.
According to the Russian side, the Baltic states are allegedly allowing Ukraine to use their airspace for strikes on Russian ports in the Baltic Sea. This refers to drone attacks which, according to Russia, could have flown through the territory of these countries.
After the first incidents of Ukrainian drones entering the territory of the Baltic countries, a narrative began to spread in the Russian information space about the Baltic states providing their airspace to Ukraine. At the same time, there is no official confirmation of such accusations from the Baltic states themselves.
I think all of this should be interpreted as attempts to pressure these countries in order to make them stop supporting Ukraine. At the same time, it is widely known that there is no evidence that Ukraine is actually sending drones through the Baltic countries. There are no such facts for attacks on the Baltic Sea. But in Russia, it is quite difficult to calmly accept this situation, which, in addition to undermining Russian oil exports, also delivers rather painful blows to Putin's regime, to its stability, and to the way the regime itself tries to present itself as invincible.
Earlier, Kremlin Press Secretary Dmitry Peskov made similar statements, also hinting at a possible response to Europe, supposedly for providing Ukraine with airspace to carry out attacks on Russia.
Moscow will take measures if EU countries are indeed providing airspace for drone attacks on Russia. Without any shadow of a doubt, it is our firm and unwavering belief that if airspace is being provided for aggressive and hostile acts of international terrorism against the Russian Federation, this will certainly oblige us to reach the necessary and appropriate strategic conclusions and take all corresponding measures.
Amid the intensification of Ukrainian strikes on Russia's military and energy infrastructure, particularly in the Baltic Sea region, Russia is ramping up its rhetoric toward NATO member states in the area. In reality, the Russians know perfectly well that Ukrainian drones did not pass through the territory of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. They are simply taking advantage of the moment to intimidate their neighbors.
They are trying to psychologically intimidate the Baltic countries so that they reduce their support for Ukraine, otherwise threatening direct military invasion. This fits perfectly with numerous statements in the global media, as well as with Trump's assertions that he will not help NATO countries unless there is some kind of military attack. In reality, all accusations from Russia are groundless. Everyone knows this perfectly well. There is no evidence whatsoever, but Russia, once again, it is trying to pressure its neighbors, using the war in Ukraine as an argument.
But that's not all. The Kremlin has panicked over the cooperation between Ukraine and Japan in the field of military drone technologies. Maria Zakharova stated that such a partnership harms Russia's security interests.
By helping Zelensky's neo-Nazi regime, Japan is getting ever more deeply involved in the conflict around Ukraine, thereby inflicting additional damage on relations with Russia, which have already seriously deteriorated due to Tokyo's actions.
The day before, the Japanese company Teradron Corporation signed a strategic cooperation agreement with the Ukrainian company Amazing Drones, which is engaged in development and production of interceptor drones. Teradron announced their intention to increase their presence in Ukraine. In Russia, however, the cooperation between Japan and Ukraine was not well received. Drones.
We regard such a step, which was clearly not taken without the support of official authorities, as openly hostile and damaging to the interests of our country in the field of security, including the protection of the civilian population. It is obvious that such decisions do not contribute to a prompt resolution of the situation around Ukraine, but only prolong the hostilities. We would also like to remind you that anything posing a threat to our country and our citizens, including weapons, as well as the production facilities that manufacture them in Ukraine, are considered legitimate military targets for the armed forces of the Russian Federation.
Such rhetoric is used by the Kremlin to legitimize strikes on Ukraine's civilian and industrial infrastructure. In reality, however, Moscow's irritation is caused by the fact that Ukraine's technological superiority, backed by the power of Japan's military-industrial complex, puts an end to the Kremlin's plans for a swift territorial takeover and forced capitulation. Shock. Kim Jong-un steps down. The dictator's daughter, the new ruler of North Korea. The world was shaken by the cunning reshuffle. A top-secret operation, Eris, has been officially launched in Pyongyang. The whole truth about the bloody legacy and Pyongyang's plans, watch right now.
Kim Jong-un is losing power. Is a replacement being prepared for the North Korean dictator? North Korea is stepping up the training of Kim Jong-un's daughter, Kim Ju-ae, as his potential successor. This was reported by the South Korean intelligence service. Kim Ju-ae has been appearing in public more and more often in recent years. This fuels rumors that she may become the country's fourth-generation leader. In March, North Korean state media published a video of Kim Jong-un and his daughter Kim Ju-ae driving a new tank. This happened after she had previously fired a rifle at a shooting range. According to North Korean state media, Kim Ju-ae, he was reportedly born in the early 2010s. In September, she made her first public trip abroad together with her father. By the way, North Korea has never confirmed Ju-ae's age. Let us recall that Kim Jong-un first allowed his daughter to appear in public during the test launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile in November 2022.
NADA is actively involved in and responsible for North Korea's ballistic missile development program and North Korea's advanced nuclear weapons program. So basically, the strategic priority areas that are officially designated as the primary directions for the nation's future growth are of utmost importance. Kim Jong-un himself has personally and meticulously entrusted and integrated his young daughter into the very heart of these significant national initiatives.
This could have been a signal that Kim is preparing a potential successor for himself. At the same time, this won't happen anytime soon since Kim Jong-un does not have any serious health problems and is unlikely to be ready to hand over power to anyone.
It appears that Kim Jong-un has no intention at all of ever relinquishing his absolute political power to anyone outside of his own immediate family. The only thing that can perhaps still be seen as a certain kind of internal competition, domestic political competition, is competition itself, specifically between Kim Jong-un himself and his sister. But now she has undergone a subtle but noticeable shift in her overall domestic and internal political positioning, so that she is now concentrating her efforts and attention primarily on cooperation, on working through various complex and essential intra-party organizational matters.
The Kim family dynasty has ruled North Korea for 3 generations since its founding. Kim Jong-un came to power after his father's death in 2011. The beginning of Kim's era of total control was marked by the public execution of his uncle in 2013. The accusations of treason were merely a pretext to eliminate a powerful rival. This act of cruelty demonstrated to all the elites that the new leader would stop at nothing for absolute power.
He is probably among his family if you compare his rule, when measured against the legacies of his grandfather and his father. He is undoubtedly the most absolute and totalitarian ruler of them all. And for Kim Jong-un, the value of a single human life holds absolutely no significance. This is not just a matter of empty words, it is a calculated analysis based on his documented actions and decisions. Because in North Korea there has been a state of permanent hunger for many years. People work for food. To get food in deeply isolated North Korea, people have to work at military enterprises. Kim Jong-un's
dictatorship is maintained through bloody purges, sparing not even close relatives. That is why the sudden public appearance of his daughter is most likely just an attempt to present the image of a model family man and the stability of a regime that was previously as closed as possible. Madness in the White House. Donald Trump has officially crossed the line, beyond which lies only political oblivion. The President of the United States has descended into total madness, terrifying the entire capitalist hill. Rebellion in Washington. Even the Republicans are panicked by Trump's behavior. His own people are abandoning the White House leader. This is the end. Democrats and Republicans are joining forces to stop the madman. See the details.
Following these highly offensive statements and aggressive threats on social media, several prominent American politicians responded with deep alarm and began to openly question the overall mental state of US President Donald Trump.
Open the damn strait, you crazy bastards, or you'll live in hell.
Former Republican Congresswoman and loyal Trump ally Marjorie Taylor Greene criticized the president's policy on X, where she wrote that Trump has simply lost his mind.
The strait is closed because the US and Israel have started an unprovoked war against Iran, based on the same nuclear lies they've been spreading for decades, that Iran could develop nuclear weapons at any moment. You know who actually has nuclear weapons? Israel does. They are more than capable of defending themselves without the US fighting for them, killing innocent people and children, and paying for it. Trump's threats to bomb power plants and bridges are harming the Iranian people. The very same people whom Trump claimed he was liberating.
Taylor Greene had been loyal to Trump for many years, but in June of last year, she criticized the strikes on Iran. She stated that this was a departure from the campaign promise to put America first and avoid costly wars abroad. After the resignation of Attorney General Pam Bondi, Trump is planning major cabinet reshuffles as he becomes increasingly frustrated with the political consequences of the war with Iran. Reuters reports this, citing its sources in the White House.
Any potential reshuffles could serve as a reset for the White House ahead of a challenging political period. The 5-week war led to higher gasoline prices, a drop in Trump's approval rating, and increased concerns about the consequences for Republicans ahead of the November midterm elections. Reuters.
He believes that his decisions are perfect, correct. The lack of results is not due to bad decisions, but to sabotage. People are undermining him. He, like Tulsi Gabbard, wants to fire the Director of National Intelligence because he doesn't like the intelligence reports. He doesn't like that they're pessimistic. Because he says one thing, but it turns out the intelligence says that the Armutsky Strait won't be unblocked anytime soon.
Several sources report that Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence in the Trump administration, and Howard Lutnick, the Secretary of Commerce, are among those who could potentially be fired. But this is only because they speak the truth and simply disagree with what Trump is proposing. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer claims that what Trump writes resembles the tirade of a deranged madman.
He threatens to commit war crimes and alienates our allies. That is his nature, but it is not ours. Our country deserves much better.
Trump promised isolationism in America, pledged to end foreign policy conflicts, and focus on domestic renewal. Instead, he has brought global issues to the forefront. From threats to Greenland to starting a war with Iran, now his policies have led to the US losing allies.
It's like in school, like some bully says, either do this or I'll beat you up, call you names, and hit you on the head. And since Trump has always been like that, even in school, and it worked for him, and now it also worked in his White House circle, he decided that this would work on a global level too. At first, the Europeans couldn't figure out what the Americans' intention was, what the plan was, where, beneath these layers of idiocy, the real policy was hidden.
Trump's behavior and manner of communication are leading to him having fewer and fewer supporters, even among those closest to him. He doesn't tolerate it. There can only be his point of view and no other. Many politicians and analysts are saying that from a strategic point of view, things in Afghanistan have failed. And all of this could even lead to the impeachment of Donald Trump.
That's all for now. And for more breaking news from the front, tune in to our next episode.